The text arrived on a Tuesday afternoon as I was packing lunches for my twin boys. Simple, direct, devastating. Hey, Madison, can you come to the bank? There's an issue with the house paperwork. Need your signature ASAP. I remember frowning at my phone. David had been handling the refinancing of our mortgage, his idea to get a better rate on the Victorian home we'd lovingly restored over our 11 years of marriage, the home where we'd raised our children, the home I'd inherited from my grandmother. Sure, I texted back. Give me an hour to drop the boys at soccer practice. His response came quickly. No need, already sorted. Sorry to bother you. That should have been my first clue. David never apologized for bothering me, but I was distracted, rushing to get 8-year-olds fed and uniformed while juggling client calls for my interior design business. 3 days later, David didn't come home from work. The first call I made was to Lena, my best friend since college. We'd been through everything together: my grandmother's death, her divorce, the complicated adoption process for my boys. Lena would know what to do. She always did. The call went straight to voicemail. Lena, it's me. David didn't come home last night. He's not answering his phone. I'm trying not to panic, but this isn't like him. Call me back? It wasn't until I was making dinner, the boys arguing over homework at the kitchen table, that I noticed the missing photographs. The wedding portrait from the mantle, the family photo from last Christmas, David's parents, who had passed away years ago. My stomach twisted as I walked through each room, cataloging the absences. His favorite books, his grandfather's watch collection, the vintage vinyl records he'd been collecting since college. David hadn't disappeared. He'd left. But why take family photos? Why not just tell me to my face? I called his office. Oh, Mrs. Mitchell, we thought you knew. David gave his notice 2 weeks ago. Yesterday was his last day. Something about relocating for a fantastic opportunity. My mind struggled to process this information as I mechanically thanked his secretary and hung up. 2 weeks? He'd been planning this for 2 weeks? When the boys were finally asleep, I sat down at our shared computer. David's email was still logged in. Another oversight, or perhaps he simply didn't care anymore. The search for Lena brought up dozens of exchanges. As I read, my hands grew cold, then hot, then numb. Everything's set, David had written just yesterday. Madison doesn't suspect a thing. The house sale closes tomorrow. We'll have access to the funds by Friday. Lena's response: You're sure she won't contest it? The power of attorney is solid? Absolutely. Got her to sign it when we did the will revision last year. Told her it was just in case something happened to either of us. The beauty of marrying a trusting woman, she never even read it. House sale? What house sale? My fingers trembled as I searched property sale in his email. There it was. Documents showing our home, my grandmother's home, had been sold 3 days ago for $150,000 below market value for a quick cash sale. The deed transfer had David's signature and supposedly mine. But I hadn't signed anything. The power of attorney. Of course. I remembered signing something at our lawyer's office last year. David's reassuring hand on my shoulder. Just in case something happens to either of us, he'd said. So we can make medical decisions, handle finances. I'd trusted him completely. Another email caught my eye. Flight confirmations. 2 first-class tickets to Santorini departing tomorrow. Names: David Mitchell and Lena Winters. My husband and my best friend. My mind flashed to Lena's business trips over the past few months, her sudden interest in David's work projects, the way they'd both insisted I was working too hard and needed to focus on the boys, rather than joining them for dinner when Lena came over. How long had they been planning this? I sat in the dark, my world collapsing around me, as another email notification appeared. From David. Madison, by the time you read this, Lena and I will be gone. I'm sorry it ended this way, but we've been unhappy for so long. You were always more interested in your design clients than in me. The house has been sold, and I've taken my fair share. The rest should be enough for you to find a small apartment for you and the boys. I'll send child support once we're settled. Don't try to contact me or Lena. Our lawyer will be in touch. David. My fair share? The house had been in my family for generations. I'd inherited it from my grandmother. David's name wasn't even on the deed. Or so I thought. The next morning, I dropped the boys at school and drove straight to our family lawyer's office, only to discover he'd retired 6 months ago. His replacement, a young woman named Abby, pulled up our records with efficient clicks. Yes, the property transfer was completed last week, she confirmed, her expression puzzled. Mr. Mitchell had power of attorney. Everything appears to be in order, though the sale price seems low for that neighborhood. He didn't have the right to sell that house, I said, my voice surprisingly calm considering the hurricane raging inside me. It was my inheritance? See. More clicking, a frown. Actually, the deed was transferred to joint ownership 3 years ago. Did you not authorize that change? 3 years ago. Right after I'd expanded my design business, when David had complained about handling all the paperwork while I focused on my clients. He'd brought me a stack of documents to sign one night when I was on deadline for a major project. I hadn't even read them. The money, I said flatly. Where did it go? Abby looked uncomfortable. It appears the proceeds were transferred to an offshore account yesterday. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Lena. Don't hate me. We didn't plan this. It just happened. You were so busy with your business and the boys, David felt neglected. We found something real together. You'll be fine. You're always fine. Take care of yourself. My voice didn't break when I called my sister to ask if the boys and I could stay with her for a while. I had 48 hours before the new owners could legally take possession of my home. 48 hours to pack up 11 years of life, to explain to my children why we were moving to Aunt Paige's, why Daddy wasn't coming with us, why they couldn't say goodbye to him, or to Auntie Lena. But as I methodically packed boxes, a strange calm settled over me. I'd always been the planner in our relationship, the one who anticipated problems before they arose, who created contingencies. David had just made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. That night, after the boys were asleep in my sister's guest room, I opened my laptop and began to make lists. David thought he'd left me with nothing? He was about to learn that he'd left me with the most dangerous asset of all, nothing left to lose. The first month at my sister's house was a blur of lawyers, school transfers, and tear-soaked pillows. Not mine, but my son's, who couldn't understand why their father had disappeared without saying goodbye. I told them Daddy needed to find himself, that sometimes adults make mistakes, that none of this was their fault. I didn't tell them that their beloved Auntie Lena was now sleeping in their father's arms. During the day, I was mommy, strong, reassuring, focused on establishing new routines. But at night, after everyone was asleep, I became someone else. A woman meticulously planning the most elegant revenge ever executed. My first step was finding a good divorce attorney, not the family lawyer David had chosen years ago. I needed someone ruthless, someone who understood what I was up against. Let me get this straight, said Victoria Reeves, a shark in an impeccable suit whose office walls were lined with testimonials from grateful clients. Your husband used a power of attorney to forge your signature on a house sale, a house you inherited from your grandmother, then absconded with the money and your best friend to Greece? Santorini, specifically, I confirmed, sliding across the documentation I'd compiled. The power of attorney was obtained under false pretenses. I never would have signed it had I known his intentions. Victoria reviewed the papers, her expression darkening. This is fraud, plain and simple. We can file criminal charges. I don't want him in jail, I said calmly. I want him to suffer the way my children are suffering. I want him to lose everything, just as he thought he'd left me with nothing. Victoria's smile was slow and predatory. Mrs. Mitchell, I think we're going to work very well together. While Victoria began the legal proceedings, I focused on damage control. My design business had been thriving before the implosion of my personal life, with a roster of wealthy clients who trusted my eye and discretion. I'd need those connections more than ever now. My most lucrative client was Cynthia Preston, whose multiple properties I'd been designing for 5 years. When I called to explain why her lake house renovation might face delays, her response surprised me. Forget the lake house, darling. Come over now. This sounds like a crisis requiring expensive wine and strategic planning. 3 hours later, sitting in Cynthia's immaculate penthouse overlooking the city, I found myself with an unexpected ally. Men like your husband always make the same mistake, Cynthia said, refilling my glass. They think because we love beauty, because we care about creating perfect spaces and nurturing relationships that we're soft. They forget that the most exquisite roses grow the sharpest thorns. At 65, Cynthia had survived 3 husbands and built a real estate empire that spanned 4 states. She hadn't achieved that by being soft. What do you need, Madison? Really need right now? I'd prepared for this question. A temporary home for me and the boys, cash flow while the legal battle unfolds, and information, anything I can find about David and Lena's new life. Cynthia nodded thoughtfully. The carriage house on my main property has been sitting empty since my son moved to Europe. It's yours for as long as you need it. No arguments. As for cash flow, I have 6 friends with properties requiring your talents. I've already mentioned your availability. She took a sip of wine before continuing. Regarding information, my second husband had certain connections, private investigators who specialize in international situations. They're discreet, thorough, and owe me several favors. Consider it handled. 2 weeks later, we moved into Cynthia's carriage house, a charming 3-bedroom cottage on her estate, close enough for convenience but private enough to begin healing. The boys fell in love with the sprawling gardens and the elderly golden retriever that came with the property. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work, accepting every client Cynthia sent my way. Each project meant financial independence, each paycheck carefully saved in accounts David couldn't touch. I needed resources for what was coming next. The private investigator Cynthia hired, a taciturn man named Miller, provided weekly updates. David and Lena had indeed gone to Santorini, where they'd rented a luxurious villa using the proceeds from my house. They'd opened a joint Instagram account documenting their brave new beginning and authentic life journey. They seem to think they're some kind of inspirational couple, Miller noted with distaste. The comments are not supportive. I scrolled through their posts. David and Lena on the beach, David and Lena at exclusive restaurants, David and Lena explaining how sometimes love requires difficult choices. Not a single mention of the children they'd left behind. Miller's next report brought more significant news. They're getting married, small ceremony on the beach next month, and they've made an offer on a property there, some kind of boutique hotel they plan to renovate and run. A boutique hotel. Using my money, requiring extensive renovations. My field of expertise. The beginnings of a plan formed in my mind. Can you get me more details about this property? I asked Miller. Blueprints, inspection reports, anything available? His eyebrow raised slightly. Planning a wedding gift? Something like that. 3 months after David's desertion, Victoria called with an update. The criminal fraud investigation is gaining traction. The DA believes we have a solid case for wire fraud, identity theft, and misuse of power of attorney. Has David been notified? His Greek lawyer has received the paperwork. They're claiming the property transfer 3 years ago made the house marital property and that the power of attorney gave him legal right to sell it. And the money? Victoria's voice hardened. They admit to taking it but claim it's his fair share of marital assets. They're offering $50,000 in child support as a gesture of goodwill if you'll drop the criminal charges. $50,000 for 11 years of marriage, for my grandmother's house, for betraying our children. Counter with this, I said, surprising myself with how composed I sounded. Tell them I'll consider dropping the charges under the following conditions. Full financial disclosure of all accounts, immediate child support payments of $5,000 monthly, and David's return to the U.S. to face the children he abandoned. He'll never agree to come back. I know, but I want him to explicitly refuse to see his own children. I want that in writing for when they're older. Victoria was silent for a moment. You're thinking long term. Good. Long term indeed. Because while David thought he was negotiating from a position of strength, I was assembling the pieces of a puzzle he couldn't even see. By the 6-month mark, several things had fallen into place. My design business was thriving, with Cynthia's connections providing a steady stream of high-end clients. The boys were adjusting to their new school, though they still asked about their father weekly. And Miller had delivered a complete dossier on David and Lena's boutique hotel project. They've purchased the property, he reported. It's a distressed asset, beautiful location, but the buildings need complete renovation. They've been approaching investors, but having trouble securing additional funding. I examined the photos and blueprints. The property had potential: prime beachfront location, charming architecture beneath years of neglect. But the inspection reports revealed serious structural issues concealed by cosmetic patches. David, always more concerned with appearances than substance, would never have noticed. Their renovation budget is about half what they actually need, Miller continued. They're cutting corners everywhere, hiring the cheapest contractors. Lena's playing designer, though from what I can tell, her experience is limited to reorganizing her closet. The final piece clicked into place. I knew exactly how to proceed. I need a new identity, I told Miller. Something that will stand up to basic scrutiny. And I need to make contact with their potential investors without David or Lena ever knowing I'm involved. Miller studied me carefully. May I ask what you're planning? A homecoming of sorts. They took my house. I'm going to take their dream. Creating Alexandra Reed wasn't difficult. Miller had connections who could provide a convincing digital footprint. LinkedIn profile showing 10 years of experience in luxury property development. Instagram showcasing successfully completed projects, even testimonials from satisfied clients. Alexandra's portfolio website featured properties I'd actually designed, photographed from angles that wouldn't be recognizable to David or Lena. Alexandra Reed was everything I'd once aspired to be: confident, independently wealthy, and unencumbered by personal attachments. Her specialty? Rescuing distressed luxury properties in exotic locations. With my new identity established, I approached the next phase of my plan. David and Lena's boutique hotel project was struggling. They'd burned through most of the money from my house sale. Renovation costs were spiraling, and potential investors were growing wary of their inexperience. Perfect timing for Alexandra Reed to express interest. I didn't contact them directly. Instead, I reached out to the real estate agent who'd handled the property sale, expressing interest in similar investment opportunities in the area. When she mentioned an exciting boutique hotel project seeking investors, I feigned reluctant interest, allowing her to make the connection. The first video call with David and Lena was surreal. I disguised myself with a platinum blonde bob, colored contacts, and subtle prosthetics that slightly altered the shape of my nose and chin. But my greatest disguise was confidence, the kind that comes from having nothing left to fear. So wonderful to meet you both, I said in the British accent I'd been practicing for months. Your vision for the property is fascinating, though I do have some concerns about the structural issues noted in the inspection reports. David's smile faltered. What structural issues? I raised an eyebrow. You didn't see the notes about the foundation problems in the north wing? Or the electrical system requiring complete replacement? It's all in the documentation. Lena jumped in, her voice tinged with panic. Our contractor assured us those were minor concerns. I see, I said, allowing doubt to creep into my tone. Well, perhaps he knows something the inspection team missed. Though in my experience, these minor concerns tend to become major expenses once the walls are opened up. By the end of the call, I'd established myself as knowledgeable but skeptical, an investor they desperately needed to impress. David promised to send updated renovation plans and a revised budget. Lena volunteered to create new design boards reflecting their authentic vision. I smiled as I ended the call. They had no idea they were performing for the woman they'd betrayed. Over the next few weeks, Alexandra Reed became their lifeline. Their other potential investors had backed out after learning about the structural issues I'd innocently highlighted. Their contractor had indeed discovered that the electrical system needed complete replacement, draining their remaining funds. They were desperate for my investment. I'm willing to provide the capital you need, I told them during our fourth call, but I would require controlling interest in the property and final approval on all major decisions. David balked, as I knew he would. We've put everything into this project. It's our dream. Dreams require proper funding, I replied coolly, and proper expertise. From what I've seen, you have neither. My offer stands until the end of the week. After that, I'll be exploring other opportunities. 3 days later, they agreed to my terms: 70% ownership in exchange for the funds to complete the renovation properly. I would visit the property in person to finalize the agreement and assess the work needed. As I packed for Santorini, I briefed Victoria on the next phase of our legal strategy and reassured my sons that mommy would be home soon with surprises. At 8 years old, they were more excited about promised souvenirs than curious about my business trip. The boutique hotel was even more dilapidated in person than the photos had suggested. David and Lena, both tanned and trying too hard to appear successful, gave me a tour of what was essentially a money pit. We envisioned this as the reception area, Lena said, gesturing around a space with peeling wallpaper and watermarks on the ceiling. I'm thinking a bohemian luxe aesthetic. Lots of natural elements, tribal patterns. I nodded thoughtfully, noting the subtle signs of water damage and foundation issues that neither of them had noticed. The layout has potential, though I'm concerned about the structural integrity of this wall. It appears to be load-bearing. David laughed nervously. Our contractor says it's fine. I'd like to meet this contractor, I said. His assessment differs significantly from the inspection reports. Over the next 3 days, I systematically dismantled their confidence while building their dependence on my expertise and funding. I insisted on meeting with legitimate contractors who confirmed my concerns about the property's condition. I questioned every aspect of Lena's design plans, thus suggesting alternatives that would better appeal to the luxury market. I reviewed their business model and pointed out critical flaws in their revenue projections. By the time we sat down to sign the investment agreement, they were utterly demoralized and completely reliant on Alexandra Reed's salvation. Before we proceed, I said, sliding the contract across the table, I should mention that my legal team has conducted thorough background checks, standard procedure for investments of this size. David's smile remained fixed, but I noticed the slight twitch in his left eye, a tell I'd observed throughout our marriage whenever he was hiding something. Of course, he said. We have nothing to hide. I smiled, tapping the contract with one perfectly manicured finger. Interesting that you should say that, David, because my team found some concerning information about funds used for the initial property purchase. Something about proceeds from a house sale in the United States, a house that wasn't entirely yours to sell. The blood drained from both their faces. Lena's hand found David's under the table. That's a private matter, David said stiffly, completely unrelated to this business opportunity. Is it? I removed my colored contacts, meeting his gaze directly. Because from where I'm sitting, David, it looks like you stole my house to finance this failure of a project. The recognition dawned slowly, then all at once. David's jaw went slack. Lena made a small, choked sound. Madison, David whispered. In the flesh, I confirmed, removing the blonde wig to reveal my natural brown hair. Though legally, you're now meeting with Alexandra Reed, who owns 70% of this property, according to the documents you just signed. This is impossible, Lena stammered. You can't what? Create a new identity? Manipulate people who trust me? Take something that doesn't belong to me? Funny, I learned all of those skills from the two of you. David lunged across the table for the contract, but I'd already passed it to Miller, who stood impassively by the door. You set us up, David snarled. This contract is fraudulent. Actually, it's perfectly legal, I said calmly. Alexandra Reed is a registered business entity I established 6 months ago. Everything is above board, unlike selling a house using a fraudulently obtained power of attorney. I stood, smoothing my skirt. Oh, and speaking of fraud, the district attorney back home is very interested in discussing that with you. The indictment came through yesterday. You're facing federal charges for wire fraud and identity theft. Lena began to cry, but I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, not even pity. Just a cool, detached sense of justice being served. You have two choices, I continued. Option 1, I proceed with my investment. You retain 30% ownership, but cede all control of the project to me. I complete the renovation properly, turn this failure into a success, and you receive your share of the profits, after I've recouped the value of my house with interest. And option two? David asked through gritted teeth. I walk away. The contract includes a clause allowing me to withdraw my investment if I discover any material misrepresentation, like your failure to disclose the criminal investigation. Without my funds, you'll default on your loans within weeks. The property will be seized and you'll be left with nothing except a return ticket to face criminal charges. David's face contorted with rage. You can't do this to us. We're getting married next month. Congratulations, I said flatly, though I'm not sure a federal prison allows conjugal visits. Which option would you prefer, David? Some ownership in a successful business or none at all? They chose option one, of course. Self-preservation had always been David's defining characteristic. I spent the next 2 weeks in Santorini, overseeing the beginning of a proper renovation and establishing protocols for regular video updates after my departure. The boys and I would own 70% of a profitable boutique hotel, funded by the very money David had stolen from us. On my last day, Lena approached me alone, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. It just happened. We fell in love. I regarded her calmly. This woman who had been my best friend, who had helped me choose my wedding dress, who had held my sons as newborns. You know what the saddest part is, Lena? I would have forgiven an affair. I would have been devastated, but I would have understood that feelings can change. What I will never forgive is how you both abandoned my children without even saying goodbye. How you thought your happiness justified destroying their sense of security. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. The difference between us, I continued, is that even now I'm not taking everything from you. You'll have income from this hotel. You'll have each other for whatever that's worth. That's more than you left me with. As I boarded the plane home, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a peaceful certainty that I had protected my children's future and reclaimed what was rightfully ours. David and Lena had thought I would crumble when they took my home and betrayed my trust. Instead, I had rebuilt something stronger from the ruins they left behind. 1 year after my trip to Santorini, the boutique hotel opened to rave reviews. A perfect blend of local architecture and sophisticated design, wrote a prominent travel magazine. Photos of the finished property appeared in luxury publications worldwide, though I ensured that neither David nor Lena was credited for the transformation. That credit belonged to Alexandra Reed, the identity I maintained for business purposes even after David and Lena learned the truth. The corporate structure I'd established ensured they couldn't challenge my ownership without exposing their own fraud. David ultimately accepted a plea deal on the criminal charges, returning to the United States to serve 6 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 3 years of probation. The terms of his probation restricted his international travel, effectively trapping him in the country he'd so eagerly abandoned. Lena stayed in Santorini, living in the small manager's apartment at the hotel, an employee now rather than an owner. Our monthly video conferences were models of professional courtesy. She never mentioned our former friendship, and I never asked about her relationship with David. Some bridges remained too thoroughly burned to reconstruct. The boys, now 9, had adjusted to our new life. The carriage house on Cynthia's estate had become a true home, filled with laughter and new traditions. When they asked about their father's absence, I told them the truth in age-appropriate terms. Daddy had made bad choices that meant he couldn't be with us right now, but he still loved them. Whether that last part was true remained questionable given his sporadic communication, but I refused to burden my children with adult resentments. My design business had expanded beyond individual clients to include commercial properties, inspired by the success of the Santorini Hotel. Alexandra Reed became my professional alter ego, handling international projects, while Madison Mitchell designed homes that reflected the healing my own family had experienced. On the anniversary of the day I'd discovered David's betrayal, I received an email from him, his first direct communication since our confrontation in Santorini. I never thought you capable of such calculation, he wrote. The Madison I knew was trusting, generous, maybe even a little naive. Who is this woman who created a false identity and orchestrated my downfall? I smiled as I composed my reply. She's the woman who always existed beneath the surface, David. The one who restored Victorian houses by herself while raising twins. The one who built a business while you were handling the paperwork. The one you should have seen before you decided she was expendable. His response came quickly. I underestimated you. We both did. Yes, I agreed. That was your first mistake? As I closed my laptop, I glanced around at the home we'd created. Not my grandmother's house, but something entirely new. Photos of the boys at their soccer games covered the walls. Design samples for upcoming projects filled my workspace. Outside, Cynthia's ancient golden retriever dozed in a patch of afternoon sun. David and Lena had meant to leave me with nothing. Instead, they'd stripped away the parts of my life that had kept me small. The accommodations I'd made to preserve a failing marriage, the friendship that had become one-sided, the house that had connected me to the past rather than the future. In taking everything, they'd set me free. Now I had something far more valuable than a family home or a faithless husband. I had the knowledge of my own resilience, the certainty that no betrayal could break me, and the fierce joy of rebuilding a life entirely on my own terms. Sometimes the most devastating endings become the most powerful beginnings. And sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better.